Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees in Matthew 16, verse 6, where Yeshua said, "Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." They, they command is the, that command is found in the words translated "take heed" and also "beware," which can be both understood to be imperatives. This command is repeated in verse 11, where we read, "How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees?" So let's consider the command by asking a few and answering a few series of questions. What is leaven? The Greek word translated leaven is either zum or zumi, Z-U-M-E, yeast or leaven. It's a powerful fungus that can cause a lump of dough to rise into bread. It could ferment liquids into alcohol or cause painful infections. But principally, leaven is referred to here caused fermentation and made bread rise before baking, and was used in much the same way that yeast is used today. Most of you are familiar with the use of a starter for causing fermentation in sourdough bread. This starter is used for the inducing fermentation into the next round of bread baking. For people living in the New Testament age, the only method of reproducing yeast was to save a small piece of the unbaked dough, which would later be used to start fermentation in the next batch of bread. So what does the Bible say about leaven? Because a small piece of leaven was able to cause a relatively large amount of dough to rise, the term was often used figuratively to represent any kind of influence, although in Scripture the word is used almost universally to represent evil. In 1 Corinthians 5, verse 7 and 8, the Apostle Paul says, "Therefore purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed Messiah our Passover was sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth." So what is the leaven of the Pharisees? It is against the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees that Yeshua is warning his disciples. He calls their teachings leaven because it has the potential of affecting not only their own lives, but everyone they come in contact with. The doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees contained a mixture of Yahweh's truth and man's traditions. The danger of the leaven of the Pharisees is that it spreads quickly, affecting the thought processes of an individual or a group of people to the extent that it corrupts their hearts and minds to the true meaning of Yahweh's word and commandments. Let's look briefly at a few of these areas that Yahweh deals with the Pharisees about. They made the commandments of Yahweh of no effect by their traditions. Matthew 15, verse 3 through 6. He answered and said to them, "Why do you also transgress the commandments of Elohim? Because of your traditions. For Yahweh commanded, saying, Honor your father and your mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, Whoever says to his father or mother, Whatever profit you might have received from me is a gift to Elohim." So forward a better image of ourselves than really exists. The outward appearance of our character and the inner reality that only God, we, and perhaps our family members know, they don't match. They did their works to be seen and appreciated by men. In Matthew 23, verse 3 through 7. Therefore, whatever they tell you to do, observe. That observe and do, but do not do according to their works. For they say, and do not do. For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders. But they themselves will not move with one of their fingers. But all their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best places at feasts, the best seats in the synagogue, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. Yahweh says, do as they say do, but not as they themselves do. The problem is not with what they believe, but the problem is with what the practice of their beliefs. At the heart of their hypocrisy was their love for honor. The Pharisees were more interested in gaining the approval and honor of their fellow men than they were of Elohim. Their religion had a motive, but it was not glorifying Yahweh, but a desire for position and prominence and recognition. We see that today, don't we? They also like to be called rabbi, which was a title of respect given to teachers. It corresponds to the honorary title of doctor given to preachers and teachers today. Now, I don't have a problem with calling someone doctor, but if you have to insist that everyone calls you doctor, you have an ego problem. They love the spotlight and special treatment. In Matthew 23, verse 13. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against them, against men. For you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. The Pharisees and scribes would not associate themselves with Yeshua and the truth that he taught. And by that rejection, they prevented others from coming to the truth because of their false teachings and their hypocritical lifestyle. They used their office to make themselves rich. And boy, do we see that today. Woe to you, scribes, and Matthew 23, verse 14. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation. The Pharisees, just like some religious official of our own day, used their position and their influence to enrich their own lives. Yeshua didn't like them, and I don't think he likes them better today. It's obscene to know that they're making 6 figures for being paid. Right down the road, downtown. So, what are we to do with this leaven? The scientific definition of fermentation or yeast is a substance, in a substance is a state of petrifaction, if I'm saying it right. The very use of the word petrifaction lets it in on the little secret that this can never be good. What it is it's decaying. It's a fancy word for decaying. Let's just examine it in 2 areas. A little unbelief in the lives of believers is a dangerous thing. When Yeshua spoke of leaven in his comments about the Pharisees, his disciples were quite confused. Matthew 16, verse 7 through 12. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it's because we have taken no bread. But Yeshua, being aware of it, said to them, O you of little faith, why do you reason among yourselves because you have brought no bread? Do you not yet understand or remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up? Nor the 7 loaves and the 4,000 and how many baskets you took up? How is it you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees. So what could he mean? They thought that his comments on leaven was some kind of veiled reference to the fact that they had forgotten to bring some bread. But Yeshua, perceiving their thoughts, reminded his followers of his miracles of feeding the 5,000 and the 4,000. What was the response of the Pharisees? No doubt he was thinking of how the Pharisees reacted to his miracle. They argued with him and tried to test him by appealing for a miracle. In short, they refused to believe, even after the miracles. Despite the miraculous provisions of meals for more than 9,000 people. Clearly, Yeshua was warning his followers against the insidious infection of unbelief. Like yeast and dough, a lack of faith can permeate one's life until it breaks out in open rebellion against Yahweh. No wonder the Lord was so displeased with his disciples' lack of perception. Perhaps the yeast of unbelief was already at work among them. After all, they had apparently failed to understand the significance of feeding miracle of the first time around. So now they were missing the understanding the second time. He wanted to avoid exposing these men to the full force of his opponents before their faith was ready to handle such a trial. None of us knows what dangers lie ahead for our faith. We may be headed for trials and challenges that we never imagined. Is our faith ready to meet whatever challenges come our way? Or have we let the yeast of unbelief gain a foothold, breaking down our trust in Yahweh and spreading resistance to him throughout our life? A little sin in the life of a believer is a dangerous thing. The only way to escape the leaven of sin is not to permit any compromise of sin to remain in our lives. The leaven of sin is much like the sowing of iniquity. We reap more than we sow. The very nature of leaven requires that it be removed, because even a small portion of leaven will permeate the entire batch. This is the warning that Yeshua gives about leaven as a symbol of sin. Paul says in Galatians 5 verse 9, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. So beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and scribes. Yahweh bless.
Yahweh bless. Amen.